And now we're up to Daf Vav Amud Beis. At this point, we have a new personality that enters high profile, and he is the main actor on the stage, and that's Rav Papa. Let's understand Rav Papa, who had an analysis in the Gemara and Kiddushin of a statement of Shmuel. In the Gemara and Kiddushin, at the very beginning of the Masechta, the Mishnah establishes that a isha niknes bekesef ubeshtar ubevir. And the Gemara on Daf Hey Amud Beis establishes that a Maisa Nesina is not sufficient for Kedushin. We need A plus B. We need a Maisa Nesina, and in addition to that, we need an Amira, a Lashon Kedushin. Harei at mekudeshes li bekesef zeh. What happens in an event that he uses an incomplete language of Kedushin? We'll see soon, for example, he leaves out the word li. Rav Papa, yesh yad l'kedushin olo. After all, the din of Yadayim in Nedarim was derived from a pasuk. Ish ki yidor neder. In Kedushin, we don't have such a pasuk, and therefore we should require a full-fledged lashon. Olo. Shall we say that even in the case of Kedushin, a lashon she'ena gamur, ena mushlemes, is also effective as a dibur shalet? Perhaps because she understands what he has in mind. And the purpose of the lashon and the dibur Kedushin is communicated. And he communicated to her what Kedushin is all about, what he's interested in, why he's giving her kesef, and she accepted it. Or should we say, as we said earlier, that since the Parsha of Yodos is derived from Nedarim, we don't have the Alfusa to equate Kiddushin to Nedarim. Therefore, Rav Papa has a suffix as to whether or not we can really compare Yad in Nedarim and establish Yad in Kiddushin. Can we apply a principle of a binyan ad? Or should we say no? Nedarim, because of its chumrah, it can be chal even with a dibur that's yad, that's incomplete. But Kiddushin, we don't have that extra chumrah, and therefore we're not going to upgrade a yad to the status of a lashon gamur and a yad with Kiddushin. Now here we have a very important Ran who raises a fundamental question. The Gemara established yesterday on Daf Hey Amud Beis that yesh liyad l'gerushin, and that's why the Chachamim allow for a get to be written in Hareat Muteres L'Chaladim. They don't have the requirement of Rabbi Yehuda of V'dein D'Lehevi Lichi Minod to add the word V'dein, and even Rabbi Yehuda only disagrees because he holds that it's Yadayim She'ena Mochichos. So why is it that Rav Papa vacillates about Yad L'Kedushin, whether we can derive it from the Nedarim or we cannot derive it from the Nedarim, when in the case of Gerushin, clearly we held Yesh Yad L'Gerushin. Again, a Yad She'ena Mochiach was a problem for Rabbi Yehuda, but if it's Yad Mochiach, certainly we would operate in Gerushin, and you would not need the word Minoi. But how can you derive Gerushin from the Nedarim? Now, there's a long discussion about this in the Ran and in many other Rishonim, but what I'd like to suggest here, just al derech pshat pashut, is the following. In Gerushin, there's no separate, just one second, in Gerushin, the purpose of the lashon is to set up a get. Once there's a get, the get has a halach of shtar, and the shtar has a power to be machriya every single suffix lahachshir a shtar. It's like Moshe Lamad Dover, you go into a restaurant and you ask for the Tudah. So he shows you on the wall there's a Tudah Hechsher. So you're not going to ask, well, okay, the meat is kosher, but maybe they didn't check the vegetables for bugs. Maybe there's no heter for the Shemitah, and I can ask if it's Chadash, and 1,000,001 questions. No, a Tudat Hechsher has the power and the authority to be machriya every single suffix, to tell you that everything's kosher. That's what a shtar is. So a get is a shtar. And if he writes, Harei at muteres l'chol adam, then we assume that he's being megarish his own wife. And he went ahead and he gave her the get. That's called Yad L'Gerish. But in Kiddushin, he hasn't even created the Ishus yet. He's trying to create Ishus. Let's say he gives her Kesef. The Lashon and the Amira, together with the Nesinas HaKesef, create a new Chalos of Kiddushin. And therefore, Rav Papa vacillates as to whether or not Yesh Yad L'Kiddushin. Do we have ample proof to establish that there is a Yad L'Kiddushin based on the equation to Nedarim? Or do we say no? The Torah was more machmir in Nedarim in order to generate an Isur Neder even in the case of Yad. Hechi Dom. What's your case, Rav Papa, where you're in doubt as to whether or not the Lashon Kiddushin is valid? He turns to one woman, we'll call her Rachel, and he says, Harei Mekudeshes Li, gives her kesef. Then he adds the following. He turns to Leah, and he says, Viat Nami, and you too. Of course, it says, Pshita, Hainu Kiddushin Atzma. That's not a Yad. There's no doubt about the fact that when he says Viat Nami, that Viat Nami means that you too should agree to be married to me. And she accepted the Kiddushin. She said, hey, there's no room here for suffix. This is a full-fledged Lashon Kiddushin. It's not a Yad. Now here, we have to add the Ran, the Rosh, and the Ritva, and the Rash, but they all say the same thing. That he turns to Rachel, the first of the two ladies, and he gives her 2 prutos. And he says to her, meaning to Rachel, accept this first pruta, Harei Mekudeshes Li, and become a shliach, a shlucha, in the feminine, for Leah. And then he turns to Leah, and he says to her, Viat Nami. And in this case, since Rachel received 2 prutos, the second pruta was designated for Leah's Kiddushin, because he only gave Rachel 1 pruta. So the Gemara says again, as we said before, this is quite clear that he means to be Mekadesh Leah. She accepted it as Kiddushin, and this is not Yodayim. So what is the suffix of Rav Papa? Ella, Kigol Diarlo Isha Reat Mekudeshes Li, the Omalo Lechaverta Viat. He left out the word Nami. He just says Viat and you. And now the Gemara says that's a case of Yadayim. Why? Because the word Viat could be interpreted in a different way. V'amrin, should we say Viat Nami Ovalol Chaverta? What he really meant to say clearly was that you too, Leah, you should also be Mekadesh to me. The Tafsibei Kiddushin Chaverta, therefore it's a valid Kiddushin. But we're not sure. We have an alternative interpretation of Viat. O Dilma, perhaps Viat Chazoi. Why don't you look on and see what goes on over here? Look how Rachel was so excited to accept Kiddushin. Tomorrow, I might offer you the same offer and be Mekadesh you. So, get yourself into the mood for Kiddushin. So there's another possibility here as to how to interpret the word Viat. It doesn't necessarily be Viat Nami, you're also being Mekudeshes here. It might be Viat Lechazoi. you should look on and see the way I'm being Makadosh you, and tomorrow I'll be Makadosh you and you'll have a Ratzon. Now he's not doing a Maisa Kiddushin vis-a-vis Leah, the second woman. So now the Gemara goes back to Rav Papa's original analysis of the sheet of Shmuel. And this is a sugya in Kiddushin on Daf Hayavit Beis. Umimi boile Rav Papa. The Gemara now invoking Rav Papa on Daf Hayavit Beis in Kiddushin and his interpretation of Shmuel is going to prove that Rav Papa certainly holds, without any doubt, that Yesh Yad LeKiddushin. What was the case? A man says, Harei at Mekudeshes to Rachel. He gives her a pruta, but he didn't say the word li. And Rav Papa interprets Shmuel as saying that even though he left out the word li, and therefore it's Yodayim She'ena Mochichos, because the possibility is that he's not being Makadosh her, meaning Rachel to himself, but rather he's being Makadosh her on behalf of his buddy, and he's really only a shliach on behalf of another man. And Rav Papa understood from Shmuel that in this case the Kiddushin will be Chal because Yadayim She'ena Mochichos Haven Yadayim. Now, Rav Papa had a problem. He raised this problem, again, this is the whole Sugi Kiddushin affair, based to Abayit. What problem did he have? He thought that there's a stira between two rulings of Shmuel. Because in the case of Areat Mekudeshes without the word li, Shmuel maintains the opinion, and that's how Rav Papa understood Shmuel, that Yadayim She'ena Mochichos Haven Yadayim. However, Shmuel took a position that in Nazir, Yadayim She'ena Mochichos Lo Haven Yadayim, and he's not a Nazir. And therefore, Rav Papa turned to Abaye and he says to him, do we have a way of reconciling two contradictory statements and positions of Shmuel? On the one hand, Shmuel said in Kiddushin, Yesh Yad LeKiddushin, even though he left out the word li, even though it's a Yad She'ena Mochiach, maybe he's being Mekadosh on behalf of someone else. On the other hand, Shmuel made a statement that in Nazir, Yadayim She'ena Mochichos Lo in Yadayim. For Amida Omar Le Rav Papa Abaye Misa Shmuel Yadayim She'ena Mochichos Haven Yadayim Michal the Sphere Le Rav Papa the Yesh Yad LeKiddushin. The very question and stira which Rav Papa raised in the context of Shmuel to Abaye indicates that in Kiddushin there is Yad. And based on the fact that Harei Mekudeshes without the word li is a valid Kiddushin, according to Shmuel, that's how Rav Papa understood Shmuel, you see that Rav Papa maintains that in Kiddushin, Yeshad the Kiddushin. And that's what brought Rav Papa to raise the steer in Shmuel. How did Shmuel say that Yad l'Nazir's Lavi Yad? So we see clearly that Shmuel holds Yesh Yad l'Kiddushin, according to Rav Papa. How could Rav Papa vacillate about whether there is Yad l'Kiddushin, there's not Yad l'Kiddushin? Rav Papa holds Yesh Yad l'Kiddushin. And the Gemara says no. Rav Papa has a suffix where there's a din Yad in Kiddushin. The reason why he didn't ask that kasha is because Chada migo my desvila l'Shmuel amalei l'Abaye. It's possible, claims Rav Papa, that Shmuel holds Yesh Yad l'Kiddushin. So Rav Papa asks Abaye, isn't there a stira in Shmuel? Because in Nazir, Shmuel holds that ain't Yad Lid Nazir in the case of Yad Shein Mochiyah. But that doesn't mean that Rav Papa himself is definite about the fact that Yesh Yad L'Kiddushin. Rav Papa himself vacillates back and forth whether Yesh Yad L'Kiddushin, and do we have ample proof by comparing Kiddushin to Nedarim in order to establish the din of Yad. Rav Papa is in doubt about that. He's in the dark. His kasha was that since it's possible that Shmuel might be holding Yesh Yad L'Kiddushin, why does Shmuel say that there's no Yad in Nazirus? How do we reconcile the fact that Shmuel maintains Yad L'Kiddushin and rejects Yad L'Nazirus? And now the Gemara enters into the sugya of Matnas Aniyim. Is there Yad in Matnas Aniyim? Another suffix of Rav Papa. As I said to you before, Rav Papa is the persona, he's the main actor on the stage today. Now, with regard to Matnas Aniyim, we're going to talk about two main dimensions of Matnas Aniyim. One is Peah. The Torah says in Parshas Emor, Lo sechala pa'asodcha bekutzrecha, and we'll talk about stock. In the case of Peah, how much do you have to separate from your field? What is the minimum amount of wheat or whatever grain you have growing in your field you have to designate for the poor people? Shiboas achas. There's no minimum amount. According to the Torah, there's no shir and peah. One single sheath of wheat is enough. On the other hand, as far as the maximum is amount, it seems that there's no maximum. You can give the whole field for peah. So the Chachamim gave a shir lamata, that's a d'Rabbanan. He should not give less than 1/60th of his field for peah. Boy Rav Papa, yesh yad lepeah or ein yad lepeah. An incomplete language of peah. Hechidomi, what's the case? Elim, if it's the case, the Omer Hadein Udia is a furrow. Lehevi peah. For Hadein Nami, and this Aruga also. Nami should be peah. Ha'i peah me'al yasahi. Like we said before, in the case of Kedusha, when he adds the word Nami, it means clearly that it's a language, a full-fledged language of peah. So this is not Yad L'Peah. This couldn't be Rav Papa's vacillating about Yad L'Peah or Ein Yad L'Peah. Kikami Boile, my answer is no. What's the case of Rav Papa? Kidon Di Omar, after he was Mafresh, he designated one Aruga as Peah. He looks to the other Aruga and he says, Va'adein. And this one, V'lo Omar Nami, he did not add the word Nami. My. What's the status, the din of the second Aruga? If we say Yesh Yad L'Peah, then when he says V'hadein and this one, he means that this should also be Peah. But perhaps there's no din of Yad L'Peah. He needs a clear language, an absolutely clear language of Hafroshas Peah. And here there's a possibility that when he says V'dain, V'hadein, what he means is this second Aruga should be mine. I need it for my own personal purposes, to feed my household. So therefore, the word V'dain is not crystal clear. It's a Yad, and now Rav Papa vacillates. Is there a Yad for Peah? Now, at this point in the Gemara sort of goes off on a little bit of a separate tangent. And the Gemara wants to know, or shall I say, the Gemara wants to analyze based on the suffix of Rav Papa, come to a conclusion about another issue in Hilchas Peah. Michlal, shall we derive from Rav Papa's suffix the Chi Omar, if a person says Sada Kula to heavy Peah, Havi Peah? The Torah says, Lo Sechala Pa'as Sodcha, which implies that you have to leave pa'as sodcha for the ani. Part of the sada will be peah, and part of the sada will not be peah. Or should we say no? The Torah is only saying that you need a minimum of pa'as sodcha, but if you like, you can actually designate the entire sada for peah once you start the ktsira. And the Gemara thinks that logically the word peah means only mixas hasada v'lo kula. And the Gemara therefore asks the question, shall we derive from Rav Papa that the entire field can be peah? Why? Because Rav Papa had a suffix in the case where he didn't give the entire shear of 1/60th of his field as peah in the first haruga. Now, I'm sorry, in this case, he didn't have a suffix, I mean to say. It was crystal clear to Rav Papa that if he gave, let's say, 1/120 in the first haruga, that when he says V'hadain, in that case, it's pshita that he wants the second haruga to be peah because he hasn't fulfilled his chiyuv with the first haruga. So he certainly wants the mitzvah for the second haruga to be mashlim and to complete the sheer peah that he's chayav to give. So there's no tzad to say that v'hadain means l'tzorach beis. He hasn't yet fulfilled his chiyuv. So therefore, we have no doubt, and we are coerced to the position that Rav Papa's suffix was in a case where he already gave the full-fledged shear and fulfilled his chiyuv with the first haruga. And nevertheless, Rav Papa wants to say that when he adds v'hadain, he's making the balance of his field into peah. And the Rosh learns that there are only 2 harugos in this entire field. So we derive from this, what underlies the suffix of Rav Papa is the fact that there's no limitation on the shear peah. And even though the Torah says pa'as sodcha, nevertheless you can be mafresh the entire field as peah. And the verse says, you're right. That's a very fair view. But Tanya, I'll prove it to you from a brisa. Minayin shirotza lasos kol sadeu peah oseh tamelon pa'as sodcha. It should have said peah shebis sodcha. Give a peah for the aniyim from your sada. Give one corner. Instead, the Torah says pa'as sodcha, meaning the entire sada could be peah. Once he starts the ktsira with the first shiboles, he can make the entire balance of his field, the entire sada into peah. Okay, now the Gemara gets back from its kind of side discussion here about whether you can be mafresh the entire field as peah, goes back to the original question of the suffix of Republic about yad l'peah. Mi amrinon, should we say, we're analyzing the 2 tzadim of Papa, whether yesh yad l'peah or came under iskish l'karbanos, since we have a hekesh between peah and karbanos, is ma karbanos yesh lam yad, af peah yesh lo yad. Now, where is this hekesh between peah and karbanos? So for that, we'd have to learn daf zayin, which is tomorrow's daf. Well, you know what? It's actually on the top of daf zayin, so maybe we'll learn it today. We'll just finish up on the top of daf zayin. But anyway, we'll see in a minute that there's a hekesh between peah and karbanos. And therefore, ma karbanos, just like if you take a neder to bring a karban, yesh lem yad, because we know that yesh yadayim le Nedarim is af peah yesh lo yad. So we're going to learn now in the first side of Rav Papa's suffix that the hekesh is a hekesh to the neder dimension of karbanos. That when the Torah compares peah to karbanos, it means that just like in Hilchos Nedarim, in Nidrei karbanos, you have a din of yad, so too, in peah, there's a din of yad. And when he says v'hadain, we're going to interpret it as if he meant it to be peah. Oh, Dilma, perhaps no. The hekesh between peah and karbanos is on a different dimension. It's not on the neder dimension of karbanos. What he iskash lebalti acher u'diskash. that when a person delays bringing a carbon that he's obligated to bring, he violates a lav l'tiachar l'shalma. So too there's a din that if a person delays leaving payah for the aniyim, he violates bal tiachar. There's no hekesh beyond the scope of bal tiachar. There's no hekesh between korbanos and payah with regard to yodayim. And here, the Ran, the Be'eri, the Rosh, they all raise the following objection. We have a principle, ein hekesh lemechza. How can you tell me the hekesh is only with regard to this one singular dimension of Bal Tiacher? A hekesh means an overall comparison. And therefore, it's not limited to one particular prat, one particular specific din. It's a hekesh l'chol advarim. So therefore, we should certainly derive the din of Yodayim in Peyah from the din of Yodayim in Karbanos, because ain't hekesh lemechza. And if you shown him answer, that this hekesh of Peyah to Karban is different than all other hekeshim, because the pasuk from which we derive this hekesh does not actually mention the mitzvah of Peyah explicitly. It's only going to be derived from a drasha. And that's why this hekesh is different. Eicha iskash, where is this hekesh that we're talking about over and over again? The Sanya we learned in a Brisa, here we turn to Dav Zayin and Aleph. The Torah says, Ki sidor nedel Hashem elokecha lo siachar l'shalmo ki daroshi drushenu Hashem elokecha b'imach b'chochet. And the Chachamim darshan from the pasuk Ki sidor neder, that this refers to Nedarim and Nedavos of Karbanos. But then, in addition, Kitisar Tidar Neder, the Torah says Lashem Elokecha. What are those two words Lashem Elokecha coming to here? And Chazal interpreted that this refers to Erchin and Charamim and Ekdeshos. Then the pasuk goes on and says Kidarosh Yidrashena. And Chazal say that's a reference to Chatos and Hashamos, Olos, and Shlomim. And then the pasuk says Hashem Elokecha. Chazal say that refers to Tzedakos, Maisros, and Bechoros. And then, after Hashem Elokecha, the pasuk says Me'imach. And that says, say Chazal, is an allusion to Leket Shekom Peyah. Because that's what it means when it says Esa Oni Imach. So Imach is referring to the Aniyim, and is Baal Tiacher in Leket Shekom Peyah. So we see that the pasuk starts with Karbanos, and that's Kisidor Neder, etc., and ends with Me'imach, which is Leket Shekom Peyah. So we have a hekesh between Peyah and Karbanos. But now the question is, do we limit that hekesh specifically and limited only to Bal Tiacher, which is written explicitly in the pasuk, or do we expand that hekesh to include the halacha of Yodayim? And that's the suffix of Rav Papa. Okay, then, so that's what we're going to end here for today with the suffix of Yesh Yad L'Tzedakah on Daf Zayin Amud. Wish you a great day.